So before we start the implementation details, let's go ahead and check out that what you'll be learning. So we're going to be building infinite scrolling using SwiftData. This means our data is stored through the use of SwiftData in a SQLite database. That's a default store. And if you pay close attention to the scroll bar that's going to appear, see that scroll bar? It's actually pretty big, right? It appeared and now it goes away. This means that we haven't really loaded any additional items. So we're going to start with like 20 items. But if I go, and you can see now the scroll line is getting smaller because now we're loading more items. So as we load more items, as we scroll, more items are being loaded. And you can tell by the scroll bar that it is getting smaller. This means more and more items are getting loaded. All right. And it will go up to 500, so the scroll bar will become really small. There we go, 500 items. Okay, so this is what we'll be building in this video. This video is brought to you by AOM Sharp School. AOM Sharp School hosts one of the largest catalogs for iOS development videos, and you can check out the raving reviews from all of my students. There are like 16,000 plus reviews. And if you look at the courses, I have pretty much all the courses you can think of when you're doing iOS development, and also workshops. So full stack iOS development, if you want to become a full stack developer using Vapor, reactive programming using Combine, Core Data Bootcamp, SwiftData Bootcamp, MV Pattern, test-driven development, Create ML, which is machine learning, Reality Kit if you want to create Vision Pro application or Reality Kit application, reminders application, SwiftData fundamentals, and a lot more. The best way to have access to these courses, what most people do, is they just buy the membership. You get access to the 22 comprehensive courses plus more, because I'm already building new ones, and 130 hours of videos, 3 digital books, and also another thing is the workshops. Now, workshops are very hands-on, meaning this is a live workshop over Zoom. This one is coming up on March 23rd, and we're going to cover server-side development using Vapor. We're going to cover the routing, the MVC pattern, database integration, consuming the API using your SwiftUI app, and check out the price. I mean, isn't that crazy? That's basically free, because these kind of workshops, they run in thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, 3-hour workshop on a Vapor framework, becoming a full stack developer where you can also increase your pay. Wow. I mean, for 50 bucks, that's a great deal. So definitely check out awesomesharp.school. This is your #1 source for video courses. Thank you so much. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing we need to do is to create a preview container. And the main reason of the preview container is that so it can provide the data, and that can be fake data, just for the previews. Okay. Now, where should I build the preview container? I can actually write it out over here. I can go ahead and create a different file. You can create it inside the preview content. That's perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and add a new file. And I will call this preview container.swift. Okay, so we have the preview container. And preview container is no more than a simple property. So this is going to return us a model container. The model container doesn't show up because we need to import SwiftData. So let's go ahead and do that. And there we go. We're creating this property over here. And inside this property, preview container, we are going to create a new model container. We can create a model container for a particular item with a configuration. Now, we don't really have an item right now. We will create it later, but it will be like item.self. So we'll just call our item. And the configuration we're going to use will be kind of like just a default configuration with is stored in memory to be true. Because for the preview, I don't really want to save it to an actual database. I just want to save it in the memory. So that is perfectly fine. Now this item is complaining. So let's go and add a new group. We'll call it models. And I will create a new model, which was going to represent an item that we will persist using SwiftData. So first we'll import SwiftData. We'll create a class called item. And obviously this can be anything. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just using item. And item, we have this item over here that is perfectly fine. So what else do we need for the item, right? I mean, we can probably have like some sort of a name associated with the item. Init, there we go. Okay. And what about the other thing, like some sort of an index, some sort of an ID? Now, this already has an ID. Whenever you decorate it with a model, if I go over here, self.id, it already has the persistent modifier. Okay. So if you want like a different ID for other purposes, like maybe you wanted to sort or something, so we can add another ID over here. Okay. Like it can be an item ID. So in order to create this item, you are going to be passing in the item ID as well as a name. Now, in your application, you may not need an item ID. You may have like a date field that you want to use to sort, or you can have many different things. But we're going to start with item ID, and we'll see that if we even need this or not in the long term. If we don't, then we'll just, remove it. Okay. Now, what should we do? Well, we have the item ID, we have the name, that is also good. And let's go back to our preview container. The preview container shouldn't complain now because we have the item. The model container, when you're initializing it, it can throw an exception. So we'll have to use a try, and we will catch it also over here. So we'll wrap this up. And whenever you catch it, right now we can't really do anything. So we'll just say fail to initialize the model container. And it's just going to blow up the app. Okay. All right. So we have this, and we still have to return from the model container over here. Now, currently we have the container, but we don't really have any, items. I mean, that was the whole point, that when you are creating this preview container, you will be returning a preview container with some items. But right now, it doesn't really have anything. So what we can do is we can say for index in 1, let's say we can run it till like 10. And this index, we can use it to create an item. So we'll say item, we're going to pass in the item ID, and we're going to pass in some sort of a name. So we'll just call it item number, and then whatever you pass it over here. Let's say index. And we can save it by saying container.main context. Now, main context is only available in the main actor. So that's why it's a little bit faded out, as you can see. But we can fix that by simply decorating our preview container property with main actor, which means that this particular property will be accessed on the main actor, and that is going to allow us to access the main context. And now we can do insert a model, which is item. So this is going to allow us to insert like 10 different items, and their whole purpose is to just provide the data for the previews, nothing more, nothing less. Now we can go back to our content view. And the first thing I want to see over here is that, can I use my preview container? Can I say over here like a model container? Again, we have to import SwiftData. Import SwiftData. Let's write it again. Model container. You can see that we can pass in the container over here. So we're just going to say preview container. Now the preview container over here is, again, is only accessible in the main context. So if I go and try to run this right now, it kind of builds. I mean, it was complaining, but it does build successfully. So sometimes what you can do is you can simply go ahead and add like a main actor. And when you add the main actor, that means that all of this, you're providing like a context in which this part is going to be run on the main actor, and then the preview container will have access to the main actor. Okay? So it looks like we are on the right track. And just to see that we can access our item, we can display our items, we can query it. So private var items, or item. And now we can go ahead and say list of items, item in, item.name. Just to see that if it displays all the items or not. It's supposed to be like 10 items or something. Okay, so we can definitely see some items. I don't really like the numbering part of it, so I'm just going to go ahead and change it a little bit. I don't really want this hash symbol to show up, so I'll just remove it. Also, this is not enough. So let's go ahead and say let's say 500 items. How about that? So 501. So it should go to 500, right? Let's go back over here. I mean, if we're creating infinite scrolling, then we should have more items, right? Okay, so now you can see our scroll bar is just insanely long, and we can definitely scroll all of these items. Okay, the items are not really sorted. So that's one of the things you can see over here. I mean, they're just being displayed, but they're not really sorted. So we need to find a way to sort our items. And there are many different ways of sorting it. I mean, you can use, like you can query it right over here and you can sort it. That's perfectly fine too. But I want to show you a different way, meaning we need to not fetch 500 items. I mean, that's just too much, even though it works pretty good. You can see it's very nice and smooth. Let's say maybe we wanted to fetch 20 items. So how would we do that, right? So let's go ahead and begin. So we have the list over here. We have a text, and this can be any view. We're just using a text view. Every single time this text view appears on the screen, we will fire this function onAppear. And this particular function onAppear is going to get fired for every text that is being rendered on the screen whenever they appear. And inside over here, we can call our own function. We can say fetch items if necessary. Now, there is no function called fetch item is necessary. We have to create that. So fetch items if necessary. This is a function that we'll have to create. Let's go ahead and create this function. We'll say function fetch item if necessary. We're going to pass in the item. And inside over here in fetch item if necessary, we're going to check a couple of different things. All right. So we're going to check if let last item, okay, and equals to, first of all, we're going to get the last item, right? So items.last. So this is going to give us the last item. And we are also going to check if the last item is equals to the item. If it is equal to the items, then load more items. All right. So if the last item, first of all, we're unwrapping the last item. Then we are checking, since this onAppear is going to get fired every single time, then probably when it reaches over here, it's going to be like, oh, if the last item is equal to this item, which it will be because this is firing every single time, then it may be time to fetch more items. All right. And in order to fetch items, we need to also calculate the page numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a state property over here, and I'll say current page. Page simply means a current screen, like how many screens that you are, displaying, right? So current page is 0. I mean, if I scroll a little bit, this will be, let's say, page 1. If I scroll a little bit, this will be page 2, and so on. So currently we are on page number 0, which is kind of like a starting point. So when we're loading our items, what I'm going to do is, first of all, increase the current page plus equals to 1. And by the way, there are other ways of doing that. There is, I believe, a batch size property on the fetch descriptor that you can try it out. I have not tried it out, but you can try it out. Maybe it's much simpler than what I'm showing it over here, but definitely try it out. And over here, load more items means that we're going to perform the fetch based on the current page that you're passing. Okay, now there is no such thing as perform fetch. This is our own custom function. So let's go ahead and create that. We'll say perform fetch. Okay, I'm going to pass in the current page. There we go. Okay, So we increase the item. We are calling perform fetch with the current page. So it will be 0 plus 1 will be 1. And over here is where we can create our fetch descriptor. Now I'm just showing you all the code right now inside the view. Now if you want to put it somewhere else, that's up to you. Fetch descriptor for the item. There we go. And we need to limit it. I mean, we don't really want all the items to be passed back, right? So we're going to fetch limit to be only 20 items. This is completely up to you. I mean, if your page requires 50 items, then maybe change it to 50. And we can also change the offset. Offset simply means that from where you're going to pick those 20 items. So we're going to change the offset based on the current page. So current page multiply by the page size, right? 20. It would be a good idea to probably put this somewhere in some sort of a constant, but right now I'm just saving it over here. So current page multiply by 20. So fetch offset, if you want to look at it like this way, let's say that the current offset is at 0, right? And you fetch, let's say, 20 items. And now I'm saying that the current page, it will be 1, multiplied by 20 is 1. So now the current offset is set over here. And now it's going to fetch 20 more items from there, and so on. The other thing that we need to do is to do a sort by. So fetch descriptor by sort by. And we will sort by, let's do init. We can use the key path. Sort by what? Well, sort by ID, item ID. I wonder if we can actually sort by ID itself, and we don't really need item ID, okay? So let's try it out. Let's use the ID, which is already a built-in property. We're going to use that. This means that we will have to go and delete the item ID. So let's go and delete that. Maybe we don't need item ID. Why would we use it if we don't need it? We can just use the ID, right? So let's go ahead and remove that. And let's remove it from here too. Great. Okay. Going back. So we are sorting by ID forward, kind of like ascending. And now we need to perform the action. So we're going to use the context. So context.perform the fetch. Well, we don't really have the context. Over here we are inserting it. So probably we should handle the context over here. The context you can access through the model context, private var context. And we can say context.fetch. And we're going to be passing in the fetch descriptor. So fetch descriptor. This can blow up. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that we wrap it with try catch, print, and whatever the error is. Now, one of the things over here is that when you're actually fetching stuff, right, self.items, we need to make sure, first of all, it's telling us that you cannot assign items is a read-only property. So we are already facing some issues that is saying that items is a read-only property, so we can't really do that. Well, instead of using query, which is a read-only property, how about we just change it to a state? So it's like a normal state variable. And now we can go ahead and assign it, but not only assign it, but whatever you're returning it, we're just going to append to it because we want to not lose the items that are on the top, right? I mean, if you're fetching 20 items, then we don't really only want to watch those 20 items. We want to watch the existing 0 to 20 item plus 20 to 40 item plus 40 to 60 and so on. So that's why we're adding them, appending them together, okay? The final thing that we need to do is when this text appears, we're going to call fetch item if necessary, that's fine. But when our, let's say, list appears, and that's going to call first time, we can also call perform fetch because we do need to, initialize it with something, right? So we can call perform fetch and passing the current page, which is 0. Now we can probably change this a little bit. We can say default value to be 0. That's fine too. And I guess in that case, we don't really have to pass in anything because the default is already 0, so that's fine. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run this and see what it displays. Oops, or what it not displays. All right, so it's definitely crashing. We need to find out what exactly happened. We have the model container over here. Okay, so let's check it out what actually happened. Okay, so I found the issue. It was actually the ID having some issues over here. If I run this application right now, you will see that it's not able to find that ID, which is kind of weird because I thought it works. It's just not able to get those fields. So unless we go and change our item to support an item ID, our own custom ID, what I can do is change this to name. All right. And it's still going to sort correctly for us. And the reason is that we are going item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4. So we are in sequence. So that's why it should actually sort correctly. Okay, so let me go ahead and run this. Okay, or by the way, if you want to run this on an actual simulator, then you will have to go to Learn App, which is your app file, and make sure that you inject the model container. Okay, and in your real application, you should not be using preview container because this is the actual app that is running. All right, so let me go back to the previews because that's where we're working. And now when we scroll, you can see that if I'm scrolling right now, you can see that the scroll bar, if you keep your eyes right there, you will see the scroll bar is not that big. Well, right now it is a little bit bigger because I just scrolled, but it is going to get bigger. You see that? So now it's actually loading the stuff when it reaches at the end. So it loads 20, and then it loads 20, and then it loads 20, and so on. So this is kind of like infinite scrolling. Well, infinite in a way that when it reaches your limit, which is like 500, then it's going to stop scrolling, okay? But it looks pretty good. I mean, it's very smooth, although our items are only text-based. I mean, there's nothing much going on. But there we go. I mean, it's actually pretty good. So this is how you will create infinite scrolling. Now, I'm wondering if it's keep on adding the stuff, or let's see. There has to be 500, right? Okay, so there is 500. So it's not really adding, just trying to see it's not duplicating the items. That's an important thing to check for you. 200, 100 something. Okay, looks fine. So there you have it. You can create infinite scrolling using SwiftData.